Uranium Fever has come and got me down. And when it comes to the Fallout franchise, whilst I will say that I am a fan, I'm certainly not the most dedicated. I've only played the 4th mainline game and the often maligned live service spin-off, and have only gotten around to watching the Amazon Prime original in the Christmas period of 2025. The 2nd season has just wrapped up, though knowing the timeliness of my videos that probably happened months ago. But in this lecture, let's take a look at the history of the Fallout franchise, both in-game and in reality, what led to the nuclear war that devastated that world, and then of course finish up with some of the real-world effects of nuclear fallout. Welcome to Science After Hours. Whilst most would associate Fallout today with Bethesda Game Studios' Todd Howard, long before him and long before Bethesda owned the franchise, there was Tim Kaine of Interplay Entertainment. He was the original creator of Fallout, leading the development of the first game along with a team of what was described as problem developers. They managed to survive 3 near cancellations to release this game on the 10th of October 1997. This was then followed by Fallout 2 almost a year later, but by this time the publisher Interplay was suffering financially and was taken over by the French publishing outfit Titus Interactive. Though that didn't make life much easier for the Black Isle Studios team, the subsidiary of Interplay that had developed Fallout 2 and was now working on their vision for Fallout 3, then codenamed Van Buren. And in December of 2003, the atom bombs came for them and they were forced to close. Interplay itself struggled on for a little while longer, publishing the less than well received Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, and in July of 2004 it was announced that the Fallout IP had been licensed to Bethesda Softworks, publisher of the Elder Scrolls series, to use their own Bethesda Game Studios to begin development of 3 games. This and many other deals like it could not save Interplay, however, and in 2007 they too succumbed to the rads and bit the dust, with Bethesda buying up the rights of Fallout in their entirety. Though it wasn't quite a smooth relationship, as later on remnants of Interplay tried to sue Bethesda for the rights to make their own Fallout MMO, and they subsequently lost. And thus, under Bethesda's ownership, we've had Fallout 3, Fallout 4, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout Shelter, and of course, Fallout 76. There is only one final release to bring us right up to the present day, and that is the aforementioned Amazon Prime original series starring Ella Purnell, Walton Goggins, and Aaron Moten, which began its first series on April 10th, 2004, the second commencing on December 16th, 2025, and there is a third on the way. But what caused those bombs to fall within the game? Well, war never changes, and so the complete blame lies with human beings, and these human beings acting in a not so dissimilar fashion to what is going on in reality here in 2026. We never actually play through the many meetings that lead to the dropping of the bombs, and perhaps that's a good thing because based on the meetings that I often have to attend, I don't think that would be particularly riveting gameplay, but we can pull the general consensus from notes and conversations with survivors that I had across the franchise, as well as information presented in the TV show. The history of the Fallout universe is identical to ours until around the 1950s, 1960s, where in a post-World War II world there is a significant investment in nuclear power that leads to the rapid advancement in technological prowess far beyond our own. Now, I will chuck in here that I strongly believe that nuclear power is significantly underfunded and far better than our reliance on coal and other energy sources like wind and water. So I think if our politicians in our timeline had invested as strongly in nuclear power as their Fallout counterparts, I could have had a Mr. Handy robot floating here beside me writing this script instead of me. But alas, that's not the world we live in. But enough of my diatribe and back to Fallout. After the Vietnam War, the USA had become petrified of communism, and so in order to try and protect themselves, in 1969 they moved from the state system that we associate with them today to having 13 commonwealths spread across the country. unsurprisingly, the general populace is not the biggest fan of this, leading to a number of political demonstrations spread across the country. But it's this continued threat of communism that leads to even more technological development, especially at Robco, who create a number of robots, including the aforementioned Mr. Handy, to help both in wartime and at home. And war is coming. By the 2050s, resources are incredibly tight and political tensions are growing. The US annexes Canada and invades Mexico, Europe invades the Middle East, and to complete the circle, China then invades the USA through Alaska. Nuclear war is on the horizon, and so the government asks Vault-Tec to build 122 underground vaults in what was termed Project Safehouse. Though with each vault being able to hold between 100 and 500 people, only 0.1% of the total US population could be housed in these vaults. And to make matters worse, Project Safehouse is not entirely what it seemed, as a shadowy group of individuals within the US government, calling themselves the Enclave, were manipulating the biggest companies in the US, such as Vault-Tec and Robco, to use these vaults for social experimentation. On Saturday, the 23rd of October 2077, the Great War began and ended as nuclear strikes hit the USA and retaliatory strikes hit China over a period of 2 hours, and this leads to other countries setting off their nuclear devices. But who dropped that first bomb? Some say it was the Chinese military, whilst others suggest it was the Enclave, and it's their manipulations who are to blame. Now, unless the Amazon Prime show reveals to us those very details, we will only be able to speculate. The effects of this single day were cataclysmic, destroying and forever changing the surface of the Earth and its ecosystems. Humans, fauna and flora alike suffer major radiation damage, either being killed in the blast or being mutated beyond recognition. Some humans became ghouls, zombie-like creatures who are able to live for eternity should they be able to keep up a radiation supply to heal their wounds and continue to take an unknown concoction to prevent them from turning feral. We have cows with 2 heads, giant scorpions, massive roaches and crab-like creatures, and not to mention those fearsome things Fallout managed to create, whose origins are even difficult to suggest, like those deadly deathclaws. Now, we have had a number of nuclear events on planet Earth, whether those be accidental malfunctions of power plants like Chernobyl, wartime events such as the dropping of bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, or the vast number of nuclear weapons tests that have been done over the years. Whilst none of these events are on the scale of the Great War, and we're yet to see the emergence of rad roaches, mirelurks and other such creatures, these nuclear incidents have all had effects on their local ecosystems. Nuclear weapons release an exceptional amount of energy in an extremely short amount of time. This is measured in tons of TNT, so a 1 megaton bomb, for example, is 1 million tons of TNT, and that's equivalent to 4.18 times 10 to the power of 15 joules, which is a lot of energy. 1 megaton bomb is estimated to be able to destroy an area up to 80 square miles, and these days weapon systems carry multiple of these warheads for an even greater area of effect. The destruction begins in the form of a vast fireball that begins to form in the 10 milliseconds post-detonation, reaching hundreds of thousands of degrees centigrade. Again, using the 1 megaton bomb as an example, by 10 seconds this fireball will have spread to around roughly 6,000 feet inside, but after a minute it will have cooled and is no longer visible to the naked eye. Though not that you'd have eyes to be able to look at anything if you were caught in this blast, so you wouldn't even know if it's happening. But the fireball is so hot that it expands outwards and vaporizes all matter that it comes into contact with, including your eyes, just to, cement that there. This isn't just limited to the physical things, but will also vaporize the local atmosphere in the area of the explosion. All of this vaporized matter and debris from the affected area will be drawn into the fireball, with the rising hot air circulating at the top, sucking in more air from the bottom and creating that unforgettable mushroom cloud that we associate with nuclear blasts. Alongside this, a pressure wave spreads outward from the fireball, within those first 10 seconds after a 1 megaton blast, managing to cover a distance of around 3 miles, and as it spreads it reflects off the ground, doing so creating additional waves that then combine with that initial blast wave in what is termed the Mach effect. Lastly, it's of course the radioactive component. The initial blast releases neutrinos and gamma radiation into the environment, either directly or from the products of nuclear fission. But after the blast is all said and done, any and all material that came into contact with the expanding fireball, mixed with the radioactive residues from the weapon itself, will continue to contaminate the area. This is fallout. In the world of fallout, though, as so many bombs were dropped, this affected area is basically the entire planet, but in reality these effects are more localized. That being said, the fallout pattern is extremely difficult to predict, as it's also based on the meteorological conditions at the time, as well as the nature of the fission products and the contaminated debris. Radiation damage affects an ecosystem from the bottom up. For example, take the Russian nuclear testing site of Novaya Zemlya. The tests here have been reported to increase the radioactive plutonium within the surrounding waters by around 4 times. This then contaminates the microbenthic protozoa that live within the sediment, which are then eaten by larger and larger organisms up the food chain, culminating in humans. This then increases our likelihood of accumulating genetic mutations that lead to things like sterility, cancers, genetic defects in our offspring, and so on and so forth, though nothing quite like the two-headed cows that we see in Fallout. And the same can be said for all other aspects of the ecosystem: increased risk of mutations in the DNA, leading to unwanted phenotypes in the organisms, often leading to their early deaths. But eventually, in some populations, mutations will take hold that allow that population to deal with some degree of tolerance to the radiation levels that they find themselves in. To limit the amount of nuclear contamination on the Earth, a number of international treaties and agreements have been signed over the years, though these mostly limit to what countries can have nuclear weapons rather than, ban them altogether. So I think it's maybe just a thing about control. But anyway, indeed, whilst we no longer see above ground nuclear testing like that in the 1950s and early 1960s, underground nuclear testing does still continue, though it is highly monitored. For example, the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty was opened for signature in the United Nations in 1996, but the USA failed to ratify signing of this agreement in a vote in the US Senate, which was lost by 51 to 48, and in 2023 President Vladimir Putin withdrew from the agreements currently in place because of this. Hence the monitoring and not the total ban, and I'm sure that won't end up killing us all, eh? Between 1945 and 2006, an alarming 2,053 nuclear weapons were tested, estimating in a total of over 600 megatons of explosives. Most of this, around 90%, was of course done by what was the USSR and the USA and China, and the UK does make up a large proportion of that remaining 10%. This has increased levels of carbon-14, cesium-137, iodine-131 and strontium-90 amongst other radioactive isotopes all across the globe, and these will continue to affect us behind the scenes for many generations to come. So if we do all end up living in a nuclear wasteland, I do hope this lecture has taught you something new. And on that sobering thought, thank you for listening. Whilst the references of the articles and websites I've used to research this lecture are scrolling up the screen, I sincerely want to thank you for making it this far in the video. Please think about liking and subscribing and do all the other things that YouTubers tell you to do. This year, no longer a PhD student, like fully, I'm a real postdoc, and it'll be a pleasure of mine to actually get somewhere with this YouTube channel. So I hope that you can join me on this journey. As I say, thank you for listening.